Greetings and salutations. My name is Jenny Marlowe, and I am the head of content at Commerce Next. And on behalf of the entire team at Commerce Next, welcome to today's webinar. Today is Wednesday, April 23rd, 2025, and we are presenting our Mastering Incrementality, Prove Your Impact, Optimize Spend, and Get Ahead. Today's experts with me today are Ryan Williams, the VP of Digital for FullBeauty Brands. We have Ryan McClurkin, Chief Analytics Officer of JTV, Taryn Lance, Senior Media Strategy and Planning at Walmart, and then Jason Gillespie, VP Global Head of Product Marketing and Analytics for RTB House. A huge thank you to RTB House for sponsoring today's broadcast. As you know, we couldn't bring these broadcasts to you without the support of our sponsors. And a quick shout out to Aga for all of her hard work in helping me put this together. I also want to thank our staff, the Commerce Next staff, Alan, Tracy, Corey, Robert, Scott. They're all off screen helping to make this webinar a success. Thank you so much. And of course, thank you to you, dear audience, for being with us today. So here's what's coming up at Commerce Next. Our next webinar is going to be on May 7th, and it's all about humanizing e-commerce. It's combining UGC with AI for full funnel success, man and machine. Commerce Next co-founder Veronica Sansev is going to be leading that one, and she's going to be joined by Vivian Chang of GNC. We have Sabrina Cherubini from Hanky Panky, and then Amanda Sinella from Spartan Race, and Nina Wouters from Bazaar Voice. This is a super hot topic. You do not want to miss it. So register by clicking on the link that Alan is going to provide in the chat. Speaking of things that you don't want to miss, it is time to register for our big event. We have the e-commerce growth show, June 24th to 26th in New York City. I can't believe June is only 2 months away. Registration is free for leaders at scaled D2C and retail brands, and we have this amazing travel program. We provide up to $1,200 in travel reimbursements if you participate in the one-to-one program. I believe this is the most generous one that is offered in the industry, so you guys definitely should take advantage of it. It's going to be our best show yet, and I'm so proud of the content that we're putting together. We already have some amazing keynote speakers lined up. Kelly Mahoney, CMO of Ulta, is going to talk about their retail innovation. We have Joe Kudla from Vuori talking about their insane growth story. Fiona Tan talking about AI. Craig Bromers from American Eagle talking about their sports partnerships and just connecting across demographic divides. We have Kim Waldman talking about Foot Locker's Lace Up strategy. Tom Ward from Sam's Club talking about connecting with consumers in very uncertain times. And hot off the press, it's so new, it didn't even make it onto the slide. We have Antonella Pucciarelli, Chief Commercial Officer from IKEA North America, talking about IKEA's customer experience. So go to commercenext.com/conference or look in the chat for the link. You guys don't want to miss it. If you missed any of our past webinars or last year's growth show, you can find them on YouTube. We have more than 500 different videos. They're all topics digital commerce. It's a great resource. Alan has the link for you in the chat. So a few housekeeping notes. One, we are recording this webinar. So if you miss anything, don't worry. We'll email it to you, or you can just find it on that YouTube link. And then also, I just want to take a moment to remind everyone about the webinar platform functionality. This is super duper important because we really want you to break the fourth wall here. We want you to engage, and this is how you do it. So there's going to be 4 tabs in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. We have chat, the Q&A, the polls, and the handouts. You can use the chat tab when you want to talk to other people who are behind the scenes, like drop your name, where are you from, chat with each other, or you can offer like a shout out to the speakers in that tab. The polls tab is going to be where I'm going to review the final results of the polls that we're going to be taking later on in this webinar. The handouts tab is where you can find an augmented version of today's presentation for you to download. And then the most powerful tool at your disposal is the Q&A tab. We very much want you, the audience, to be part of this. And I, as the moderator, I may have missed something, and you guys are the practitioners. If I'm not asking the questions that you want to hear, like put them in the Q&A and I'm going to read them to the panelists. This is an amazing opportunity for you guys to connect with the thought leaders on the panel and be interactive. And even if you don't have a specific question, you can always upvote audience questions. This is going to help me prioritize which questions to ask our panelists first. And then to show you just how serious I am about getting those audience questions, One lucky winner that we're going to draw at random and we will notify by email is going to win a Sola Mesa stove. This is amazing. Like this, when we had this the last time, it went gangbusters. People loved this gift. So to enter, all you have to do is ask a good question or two or three, and you have to live in the US or Canada. That's the fine print. And that's it. So ask a question. Good luck, everybody. Lastly, if you are watching this on the replay, please note that there are handouts available. So if you just click on the highlighted document icon at the bottom of the video player, you can get the handout that way. And now, the moment you've been waiting for, I will finally zip it and hand over the reins to our first speaker. We have Jason Gillespie. He is the VP Global Head of Product Marketing and Analytics for RTB House. He's going to tee us up with a primer on next-gen incrementality measurement. Jason, it is so great to have you.
Well, it's great to be here, Jenny. Thanks so much for the warm introduction. And frankly, I might ask myself a question about that to get that Solo stove. That's a great giveaway. So yeah, I encourage everyone to get your questions in later on. With that said, I'm Jason Gillespie. I'm here from RTB House. If you're not familiar with us, it might be because we're based out of Poland, but we've been in America for about a decade, have about 1,500 people. And we are a first-party advertising DSP that focuses on driving business impact, meaning measurable transactions and then proving they're incremental. And because we've spent so much time thinking about incrementality, it's my pleasure today to present to you some of our thoughts and findings regarding incrementality and how to make sure that you're not just getting attributed transactions, but that those transactions, or whatever metric you're measuring, it could be leads, it could even be site visits, are truly incremental and don't just represent what would have happened anyway. Let's talk about that. So, of course, the first thing to note here is in the US, at least, e-commerce is, relatively speaking, still booming. I realize there's been a little bit of turbulence in the economy that may affect some of you more than others, depending on where you source materials from. But the fact is, this is a great business to be in. And it's even better going forward because there's a lot of projections that Amazon, for example, is kind of capping out on market share, which means when growth occurs, it's going to be actually a little more widespread than it has been in the past. It also means that the marketers who are the most sophisticated, who are measuring appropriately and leaning in on the most advanced tools, are likely or more likely to capture that growth than those who aren't. So I would encourage everyone to do your best to take advantage of this tailwind and capture as much of this growth sort of as is reasonable. One way to do that is to make sure you don't waste your money. Now, this has been a topic for a very long time. The quote is attributed to John Wanamaker, who was literally born in 1838. And it's the old "half my money on advertising is wasted. The trouble is I don't know which half." And his sentiment and his thoughts ring true today. Here we are a good 100, 150 years later, as much as they did the moment he said them, which is, I just want to make sure that I'm really, truly getting something for my money. I don't want to just put points on a board. I don't just want to see like last click transactions in Google Analytics. I want to make sure that I'm truly getting incremental transactions, leads, site visits, brand lift, whatever it is, due to a specific spend. And so the problem is really as old as mass market advertising itself. One issue here is that the continuity that we all enjoyed for many years, especially marketers who leaned into GA3, Universal Analytics, and Google, Google hadn't really made major changes for 10 or 15 years. And I think as an industry and as a marketing ecosystem, we all got very comfortable with kind of the how things worked and how you tracked it and what it meant. And some of us had already run, say, incrementality studies, and we knew how those compared to largely last click attribution. Then Google sort of showed up and said, hey, by the way, we're not just doing an update. We are completely changing the way web analytics works. And they rolled out GA4. And this thing's got data-driven attribution, which has some nice theoretical properties to it, but it's also a very black box, and it's hard to know which vendors are really driving the performance. It operates on this paradigm that, yeah, we're going to give you all this data, but you might need a data analytics team to go into BigQuery and really pull things out of it. Some of the reports you may have enjoyed using are no longer there. So without commenting on whether it's truly better or worse, it's very different. It's very different in some powerful ways, and that has made a discontinuity or a break in how marketers are accustomed to measuring. And breaks can be good or breaks can be bad. I'd like to say this is good. It's good because mostly what I'm hearing from marketers is, hey, we enjoyed GA3 for a long time. GA4, there's some things we like, there's some things we don't like, but here's what we're doing instead. Here's what we're doing that's now additive. And the change to GA4 was a forcing function or something that nudged us in the direction that we wanted to go. And so from that standpoint, it's been very useful. And one of the reasons is that like the traditional metrics just simply can't keep up with the need to drive business outcomes. Like, sure, you can look at how many people clicked on something, and that does tell you to some degree activity because most of those clicks should land on your website, but it really misses like what was the consumer intent and really what was the impact of that. You can also look at, hey, I had a transaction and here's kind of the path to purchase that I see on my website. And that's useful. And I encourage that, don't get me wrong, but it really tells you nothing about causality or which of those visits may have truly led to the purchase. And even if you're looking at like a ROAS or a CPA, if you're doing it based on an attributed metric, you get, again, some degree of kind of marketing efficiency, but it really misses any notion of incrementality. And so a lot of the traditional metrics that we're using, they're still good. They're still operational. I wouldn't say don't look at them, but they're incomplete. They simply don't give marketers the full and complete picture that marketers need to get the most out of their money in a very competitive environment and in an environment where more and more CFOs, for example, are demanding better returns. And so what do you do? What do you add? What do you lean into? Our viewpoint is incrementality as a true source of truth for what really works. And it can give you that as long as you ask and answer the right way. And really the right question is, if I have two worlds and these worlds look identical, except there's a slight difference in one of those worlds. And that slight difference might be that in one world, I'm using this vendor and here I'm not. Or in this world, maybe it was a treatment to site visitors. I'm offering this and I'm not over here. As long as everything else is constant and you've done a good sort of random split, then when you observe differences in how those two worlds perform, you can attribute them to the thing that's different. Now, I don't think that's rocket science. In fact, that's been around since like 1500. So if you don't believe that, you've probably got a problem with the way knowledge has been accrued for about 500 years. So that's sort of your issue. For those of you who are generally on board with the scientific method, this is a great way to kind of get your hands on what's your marketing actually doing. And we're sort of lucky because we deal a lot of times with site visitors. Sometimes we deal with just anybody on the internet. But if you're thinking about your site visitor population and you're testing, hey, a new widget or a new marketing approach, you can always split those site visitors using random split logic. And ideally, you do it blind and random, kind of what I like to call medical grade methodology. You want to construct your control group so that it's random and therefore it reflects the entire population among any dimension. And you also want to do it blindly, just for the sake of being as unbiased and the perception of lack of bias. I'm picking these people before I know anything about them. I don't know if they're coming and putting 27 things in the cart or if they're just glancing at a product. Before they do any of that, you should sort them into sort of an exposed group or an unexposed group. And then you should kind of wash out the effect of any prior advertising. Usually that takes about 7 days or so, at least in our world in performance marketing, especially in the lower funnel. And then you have some sort of measurement period, which again runs generally about 30 days. And your analytics team could advise you, how long these windows should be in order to get a degree of confidence that there's actually a difference in performance. And then you bring everybody back together. And when you do that sort of study, you can do things like say, wow, I'm getting 1,000 last click sales from this vendor in Google, but when I run an incrementality study, I'm only getting, say, 500 or 200, or maybe I'm getting 1,500. You just don't know. There's a tether. There's a relationship between your attributed sales and your incremental, but it's kind of like tying two sticks together with a rope. You pull one, eventually the other will move, but it's hard to know in advance how big the gap is between those two sticks or those two measurements. The good news is this is getting a lot more accessible. There's kind of a market standard that third parties will do. You've probably heard, this laundry list of third-party companies that can help you better understand how well your marketing is working across all your vendors. They used to use MTA. That's kind of falling by the wayside because it was never really all that well justified. MMM is certainly a valid approach, where it attempts to look at differences in inputs and compare them to differences in outputs. And geotesting seems to be quite common because it's rooted like in very favorable characteristics back in the TV days. It's simple to understand. You're simply not running ads in certain geographies. One of the biggest challenges here is local noise. So there was a big snowstorm in Buffalo and a fire in Los Angeles and nobody bought anything. And that can really gum up kind of geo-based testing. The other thing is, on the internet, it's surprisingly hard to know exactly where someone is. My phone, for example, the other day told me I was in Nebraska. I'm sure it's a lovely state. I've never actually been to Nebraska in my life. So there are a lot of issues with geotesting. Again, not that it's terrible, but there are better ways. Like a next generation approach is what we call ghost ads. I'd love to say we came up with this, but actually Meta really pioneered it. And ghost ads is a fairly simple concept that you do an A/B split. And then you look at sort of who actually got exposed, and you look at who would have been exposed but wasn't in this sort of ghost ad population. Doesn't require any sort of DMA level splitting, doesn't require that you know where someone is, and can give you very granular results across segments such as people who've bought from you previously and new buyers. And that can be very interesting to marketers. The only con is you can't really run it yourself. You need to work closely with your marketing vendor because they're going to be the ones who actually executes that ghost ad and has the ad targeting logs from which the data roll-ups would be complete. This is just a visual example of what I just said, which means my talk track may have been just a pinch ahead of the slides. Sorry about that. You can see here the dotted line indicates that, hey, while you may have had a 100,000 person group that was potentially exposed, you only showed ads to say 25,000 of them because you didn't want to show people that were just about to buy. And you'd show the same thing in the B group via a ghost ad, and then you'd do that measurement. We've found that this is really useful because then you get what I like to call an incrementality ratio, which is what percent of my attributed sales are actually incremental. And we find that for traditional kind of machine learning approaches, that tends to run in the 50 to 60% range. When it's fraud or bots, you'll find that number, close to zero, frankly, where they'll drive, some attributed transactions, especially if it's non-financial, like lead generation, for example. Fraud and bots are tricky there, but they won't do much on an incremental basis. And then also, if you're using deep learning, it tends to go after more incremental transactions because it's not as focused on just driving click and convert. It's more of a holistic study of user behavior. So what's next for everyone here? I think if you're thinking about moving into incrementality or you're already there, certainly start with where the dollars are. Identify the highest investment areas and start talking to your vendors. And those can be either third-party independent vendors, your own analytics team that might run their own MMM, or companies like RTB House that have a robust ghost ads mechanism for measuring incrementality. That's sort of that middle bullet. Work with partners. Meta offers this. Google has some offerings. And various other vendors will work with you in order to find incremental instead of just attributed. And then once you have that, you can really make some interesting decisions. Instead of just leaning on, here's my GA results, for example, you can say, hey, the incrementality is better or worse for a lot of these. I might want to move spend up here or down there. This one seems about right. And you can potentially drive a higher overall return on your marketing spend by having an omnibus view on incrementality. And Jenny, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Jason. Yeah, actually, we got a couple of really great questions that came in. I'm going to reserve them for the panel, but you'll see them in the chat. I'm really interested to see what your POV is going to be on that. So next up, we're just going to, before we head into the panel, I'm going to do a couple of polls. It's our instant poll time. I'm going to pull up the first question, please, which is, how often are you running your incrementality tests? Is it weekly, monthly, quarterly, only for major campaigns, rarely, or ad hoc? All right, so the majority, it looks like, are doing rarely or ad hoc on this, is about 47%. And then right after that, it comes to monthly. So, all right. Let's go into our second poll here. which is where are incrementality insights driving the most impact for you? And then you can select all that apply. Is it A, media channel budget allocation? The B, creative and messaging optimization? C, vendor partner performance evaluation? D, cross-functional alignment and planning? E, improving attribution models. All right. So it looks like the majority here is media budget and channel allocation. We've got that at 40%. At 21% is vendor partner performance evaluation. 16% is both for creative messaging optimization and improving attribution models. So majority is media, channel, and budget allocation. We're actually going to discuss this with our panelists later on. So thank you guys so much for taking that poll. And so with that, I'm actually going to have a last question. This is the question that concerns our May 7th webinar, Humanizing E-commerce, Combining UGC and AI for Full Funnel Success. This is the thing that I teed up earlier. Veronica Sansev would like to know, where in the purchase funnel do you currently use UGC? And you can select all that apply. So is it in the awareness, for example, in marketing creative? B, interest consideration, for example, e-commerce site. C, intent evaluation. This is trigger-based marketing for add to cart. D, purchase. So like in the checkout flow. Or E, retention loyalty. So like post-purchase communication focused on customer satisfaction and repeat business. So the majority is awareness. That is in marketing creative. About 40% of you responded to that. So Veronica is going to discuss that on the May 7th webinar. Do make sure that you tune in for that. It's going to be a phenomenal discussion with great panelists. And speaking of great panelists, it is time to bring up my panelists. Robert, would you kindly bring everybody up? Welcome. Welcome, everyone.
Hello.
Nice to have you.
Hello.
Welcome. So I kind of teed you guys up really quickly at the beginning of this webinar, but I would love to get a beat on each of you and what your remit is. If you wouldn't mind, I'm going to start with the ladies first. Taryn, why don't you introduce yourselves and we can go around and make quick introductions.
Thanks, Jenny. I'm Taryn Lance. I lead the media team at Walmart, which in the US, which covers things like full funnel campaigns centered around the holiday, as well as performance media.
Ryan Williams, why don't you come up next?
Hi, my name is Ryan. I lead digital experience here at FullBeauty. FullBeauty is a portfolio company of 18 and growing brands, specializing in plus and extended plus sizes, primarily women, but some men and home goods. We are D2C exclusive, based in New York City.
Yeah, I'm Ryan McClurkin, Chief Analytics Officer at JTV, but been in the brand space, the kind of advanced analytics brand space for better part of 15 years, and really in the kind of advanced performance marketing space for about the past decade. So wonderful to be here.
Great to have you guys. And Jason, we just met you, so glad to have you on. So we have a great mix of different brands, different roles. So I thought I'd start with a kind of an overall primer question, which is, how are each of you defining incrementality in your organization, and why is it so critical right now? Ryan Williams, let's start with you first.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the definition is actually pretty straightforward. It's how you apply the definition to your programs that I think is really kind of the unlock that we all continually try to strive for here. But the way that we think about it is that if it's not driving net new behavior, it's not incremental. So you've got to be careful of channel shift. You've got to be careful of buying sales that were either going to happen on their own or weren't profitable. There's a variety of techniques. There's no one silver bullet, but that's what we're constantly trying to look for.
And Taryn, how are you defining it?
Yeah, similar to Ryan, I think about it as net new behaviors. If you think about a typical Walmart shopper, they actually spend a lot of time either in store or digitally kind of repeat purchasing, right? You're going to replenish your eggs and your milk. So it's not about that. Those behaviors would happen with or without me. It's what kind of new behaviors can we inspire? So what's additive to that weekly shopping routine so that you're buying even more things? Or it can mean you're additive in your behavior as it relates to the way in which you buy. So if you'd only historically been a store shopper, are you now actually getting things delivered to your home? Those are all incremental behaviors that we are focused on driving and measuring that aren't akin to our, BAU shopping behavior.
And Ryan McClurkin, I know that you had something similar to
Yes.
Ryan. And
Yeah, similar to in terms of incremental orders or incremental benefit, if you want to think about it like that. But we go a little bit beyond that in just the framework that's been developed over the years in terms of how we're changing the customer's long-term behavior. So when you think about predictive lifetime value and LTV of a consumer and how much they're going to spend with you in the future, are you changing the trajectory of that consumer? Because what you're trying to do as a brand is not just create immediate revenue, but future revenue as well. And that is a measurable metric if you have the right models in place. And so you're trying to change consumer behavior over long periods of time and what their future behavior might look like and nurture them into a more valuable customer. And so an incremental benefit in our world and in my world could be that you're actually adding future value to that consumer that you may not have previously had. And that goes above and beyond the immediate revenue that gets generated.
And Jason, why don't you give a quick POV on that as well?
Yeah, I mean, our POV as a vendor is people engage us to drive certain business outcomes, and they're measuring those often through attributed systems. And sort of it's our challenge to not only show the attributed number, but to show how we would calculate an incremental number that correlates with that attributed number. Meaning, let's say you want transactions from people that have never bought from you before. We'll call them new customer transactions. And you say, hey, you drove 36 of them. We need to have an incrementality study to see, is that 36 a 36? Is it an 18? Is it a 54? We need to be able to basically mirror any attributed result with an incremental result.
So my next question was going to be about setting up frameworks, especially given like recent industry changes. I kind of want to fold that into a question that we got from one of our audience members, Doug Jensen. He's the SVP Global Data and Analytics from Estee Lauder Companies. And he asks, he says his POV is that incrementality is the key unlock to any measurement methodology, regardless of test control, attribution, or marketing mix modeling. Do you agree with that? And if so, do you think that people don't understand incrementality as a concept, and what can the industry do more to educate? So I think that folds in actually nicely with how marketers are changing the frameworks, because it gives you the idea of like, what is it that we need to aspire towards?
So I'll take a shot, Doug, and that's a great question. And I think there are different use cases. I mean, not just incrementality it is an unlock as it relates to attribution models and MMM and those things. And it can actually help educate those models. That's actually where I see a lot of use cases that you can actually tune MMM models with incrementality studies. The issue is one of the issues around incrementality is the standardizations of how you do the incrementality test. There's so many different ways. There's A/B tests. There's the vendor side can do incrementality. There's geo tests. So there's all these different ways and how you actually construct those tests and actually use them. But they can the way I've actually seen it work is that they actually inform some of your other measurement methodologies, right? You can actually tune some of your other measurement methodologies with incrementality testing. And I view it as kind of a triangular framework. Really, what you need is you want to have some decent attribution models so you can see how much of your benefit and revenue is being attributed to marketing in general. Then you need an MMM model that is giving you some indication of incrementality, and then you need incrementality testing as well. So you need that kind of triangular framework called kind of the golden triangle as to how you want to tie all those together. But I don't think one of them in isolation gives you kind of the golden truth. I think they actually work in conjunction with each other, and incrementality can actually inform some of the other models in a very sophisticated manner.
Ryan Williams, I know that you weren't terribly affected by the, we talked a little bit about the GA4 transition. You weren't terribly affected by the transition given the tools that you use. Tell us a little bit about how you guys operate, and then, how you're kind of standing up everything.
Sure. Yeah, I was just trying to think of, the best insight I could provide on the last answer as well. We have a for better or worse, we have a bit of a more simplified kind of data ecosystem. Being a direct-to-consumer brand, we are we are not also simultaneously trying to market and advertise across wholesalers or other channels in which the customer can transact. So we primarily use a last click attribution model. It is, last touch is flawed, but we haven't yet found something better that we truly trust. And across all of our channels, that's primarily what we continue to use. We were effectively immune to the shift to GA4, which I know has really sort of turned tables on a number of different companies, because we just happen to be using Google or Adobe Analytics for our overall measurement and analytics platform.
So Jason, you talked a little bit then about GA4 and like how it's shifting the landscape. I just want to hear about from you, like how, from like a bird's eye view, like how are marketers in general shifting their, incrementality measurement frameworks in response to that?
Yeah, I think that more broadly, the GA shift has caused marketers to reevaluate how they're measuring, generally speaking. And we're seeing kind of an explosion of what I'll call alternate measurement methodologies. Someone here just mentioned like, oh, well, we use Adobe, so we didn't have to worry about it, which was kind of awesome for that person. Is one less thing to worry about. Others are thinking about, should I be doing a MMM, media mix model, an older approach, but that still could merit a lot of consideration. Others are thinking about, do I have an MTA and does that make sense? Do I have enough data visibility to make that work? And then many are leaning into incrementality, whether it's through a company that offers it or leaning in on their vendors. We know that the chatter we've heard has escalated dramatically in the last 24 months around incrementality.
I may have made a mistake to make it sound like we at FullBeauty have an easy job. It's still a tough market out there for everybody, and we have a very aggressive test and learn culture, and are routinely testing tactics and channels and even vendors across all means of driving traffic.
Taryn, I know that you had some very strong feelings around how to use various tools, how they should and how they shouldn't be used. Tell us a little bit about kind of what you're working on at Walmart.
Yeah, you probably say that because I said, unlike Ryan, I hate LTA, but I think part of that is, we spend a lot of money, obviously, at Walmart. And so there are a handful of channels that don't get included in LTA. And so what ends up happening sometimes is you are making decisions off of really small subsets of data and applying them to all the rest of your decision making. Ryan doesn't have that same problem given like the business that he's in. So I get why you're using things like that. We do, to Jason's point, use MMM and MTA. And actually, what's interesting is sometimes incrementality for us is a good and bad thing. You might drive incremental behaviors in the form of delivery services that actually cannibalizes our in-store sales. So it's a really interesting tension between how do you strive for something, but actually, like more so than that, how do you actually understand what is happening, or using the notion of incrementality to get a really good handle on the behaviors that consumers are taking, in my world in particular, like those shopping behaviors. And then what do we do with that information? It's similar to, I think, where you were going, Ryan, around the actual journeys and lifetime value of things. Like I might be okay cannibalizing one aspect of our business if it's going to be where more incremental growth is going to come at a future state. And all of that feels like utilizing the most accurate, comprehensive data sets to then determine which of these behaviors am I willing to kind of give and take, and what does that tension kind of look like?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I mean, where I see a lot of brands falters in that data capture layer related to this topic. And, I think a lot of marketers fall back into LTA and that last touch attribution just because they don't have what I'm going to call like world-class data capture processes, right? In order to build really, really effective MTAs and MMMs, and this is coming from the advanced analytics side, you have to have like amazing data capture processes. And so they can't ever get into advanced data measurement properly because they're not collecting the right data and in the right fashion. And it's very hard for brands to do. It's a very time consuming and expensive investment typically. And so, but when you think about like, if you were able to see like true customer journeys and how many touch points is actually taking consumers to convert, like, and you would realize how flawed like an LTA model is, or even just a singular model in general, right? That's saying, oh, it's first touch or last touch, or even a 30-day window or 60-day window. Like some consumers take, 200 days to convert to a brand. Some take 7, and it's just, they're very individualized. And so that data capture process is so critical. And, being able to capture not only all the first party data, but any type of third party data as well. And being able to put that into a singular data warehouse. So, working with your advertisers, people like RTV House to get log level impression data about your consumers, and like being able to build those customer journeys is so critical when you go to do what I'm going to call true marketing measurement. And even from any of those MTA, MMM, incrementality, like you have to have amazing data capture processes to do that well.
Ryan, can I give an example that has happened to me before, which is, you get a sort of an understanding of like, let's say how someone is buying home decor or furniture. They're looking on different social media, checking out what influencers have to say. But at the end of the day, before they go make a purchase, maybe on Walmart.com as an example, or some other retailer, but hopefully Walmart.com, they're going to then look for a coupon somewhere or seeing if they could like price match. And so what is gobbling up sometimes all of that attribution would be an affiliate space, or a space where if you dump all of your money there, you probably wouldn't be as successful if you thought about how could I just infiltrate into that sort of discovery journey. And I think that that's where sometimes, like to your point around the data capture and truly understanding what are facts, like both of those things, the notion of social from a discovery aspect and the notion of, an affiliate site from a pricing perspective are super important. It's just knowing what is going to happen versus saying, well, that last click happened here, so that must be it. Check. We should just put all of our money into this one place.
Yeah. That's like a huge flaw, right? Like, because the affiliate is so close to the actual transaction that it could be that you see a ton of benefit and you're like, oh, go invest more there. But in reality, what you really want to understand is, should I be investing in the upper funnel to drive traffic? And if they end up, if you end up getting incremental conversion from them visiting the affiliate site, that's perfectly fine. But you need to see that conversion path, right? And it's extraordinarily difficult to do, and to get to a place like that. But if you're really committed to trying to measure your marketing performance and incrementality, like you have to go down that path.
Because like we were talking about incrementality probably in the form of business outcomes, which I think is fair and valid. Like what if we were also talking about like incrementality in terms of influence or behavior shift? Like how much more could you get someone to think differently or feel differently about you as the precursor to, will they, do something from a business perspective more with you?
I'm going to grab a question from one of our audience members. This is the first question that was posted in there from Olga, forgive me, the last name, Verbitska, Senior Director of Analytics Highlights for Children. She asks, if we are in the initial stages of incrementality testing, what are the best channels to start testing in to see the impact?
I'll comment briefly on that as a potential channel. First, where are you spending the most money? Not just because it makes business sense, but there's a strong technical reason for that. Incrementality studies will require a difference in outcomes in the two worlds. And the bigger your spend, the more likely, assuming it's doing something, you'll see that difference. It can be hard to assess incrementality for a vendor that's only bringing you, 0.2% of your site sales, because that just gets lost in the noise, even if that went to zero. So I would encourage you to start with where the money is and with the vendors that are well set up to do it. So you'll start talking to your vendors and say, hey, I need to know that this is incremental. And they're going to tell you right now, either, hey, we can do that. We have a program like RTB House does. We're happy to do that for you. Meta will do it for you. I'm sure there are others. And then there might be some that say, no, that's not really part of our offering. And you'll have to figure out your own way to handle those.
Let me try to plus Jason's answer a little bit. Another take on that is complementary to where you're spending the most money. If you're looking at a situation where you're considering spending incremental money, especially if you're working with, bringing on a new vendor, either from a marketing or a services or experiences perspective, we almost always require an A/B test when bringing on a new vendor. The good ones are typically confident enough to prove their value. And not every business is the same. Not every customer base is the same. Some programs that work for most clients won't work for all. As long as upfront there's sort of an understood methodology that you're going to use to understand whether that's a mutually beneficial partnership to move forward with. It's usually a best practice.
Yeah, and I wonder too, like even before you get into like the notion of having to have all the testing frameworks, so I think about it interesting too from just the media partner perspective. I'm going to use Spotify and Pandora, and I hope I'm going to say this accurately, and I apologize if not. But if they have two slightly different audience bases, even engaging with both is incremental in terms of reach or the kind of people or different audience subsets that you're talking to, if you're going to make the wild assumption, which is probably not accurate, that someone has only downloaded one on their mobile device. But I think like even there's some incrementality decisions as it relates to customer bases and looking at net new media partners, not just within a media partner. How do you drive incrementality for your business?
Yeah, I would say, Olga, too, where do you sit with your general measurement and like just generally speaking too, because where we typically engage with incrementality is if we have MTA, we have MMM, right? If they don't agree. So if you have, MTA showing really strong result, but then MMM doesn't show that it's highly incremental, or vice versa, do you throw an incrementality test in the loop to kind of be that tiebreaker and that guiding principle to say, okay, can we set up a really good incrementality? I typically see this with Google brand search, like, depending on your business and like how much repeat customer business you have, right? Like Google brand search, are those people, are they going to find you anyway? And they're going to purchase anyway, right? And they're just clicking that brand search link and it's just costing you money, but how incremental is it, right? From like an MTA perspective, you generally see really strong results from Google brand search. But then from an MMM, it may not be as strong, right? And that's when maybe some geo testing with incrementality can really help you play that out and see where does it really sit. But I would ask the question of too, like you say you're in the initial stage of incrementality. Do you have other measurement tools in place? And like, what are they telling you? And do they disagree, right? Because that's where you may go to incrementality and say, okay, I need to get a different read on it.
And how long are you willing to wait, right? Like short term, long term. Like if you need something to happen very quick and something already can work, you'll probably do that thing. So I think the like notion of how much time do you have and how much leap of faith is like the group or company willing to take are part of questions you would need to answer as you start to get diving into incrementality.
One more audience question for right now, which is how do you do small incremental tests inside of large budgets? For example, spend millions per month but want to do a 50K test. And then laddering into that is another question, adding to Lauren's question. That was from Lauren D. Simon. Doug Jensen asks, adding to Lauren's question, I have found that lift studies from Meta Google often do not converge with other incrementality measurement techniques like MMM. Do you have experience about why this may be true? So how do you do small incremental tests inside of large budgets?
So I have some thoughts on that. Well, first off, I'll answer Doug's first. Meta and Google have a very high self-interest in terms of showing you incremental results. I guess that's a really good way to put it. So I would, I'm always cautious with that. I'll just say that in terms of, you may want your own kind of third-party incrementality testing or MMM results in terms of your own results, because there can be a bias depending on, and they're what I don't like about Meta and Google is how black boxy they are. It's not that I don't want them to do the incrementality test, but like if I'm having a vendor do an incrementality test or an MMM result, it better be an open book, right? Like I need to see the math behind it before I'm gonna just believe the result that comes out of it, right? And that's always the approach. Like if you're not willing to show me how the sausage is made, then you probably are biasing that result toward your own benefit, and that's always a red flag for me with a vendor, right? Like I need to see the sausage making to make sure it really checks out. Which good luck getting that with Meta and Google. The second thing about small tests, that's a tough one. It depends too. Typically with small tests, and if you're spending millions per month, what I like to do with small tests is concentrate the dollars on very specific geos. So if you're already penetrated through let's say the whole United States with your millions of dollars, that 50 grand, if you tried to spread it through the whole United States, you may not be able to measure it, like literally any type of lift. And so if you are doing a test, I like to, can you concentrate that 50 grand on and give an impact to a certain number of DMAs or a certain small number of geos, and then if you're keeping all else the same, do you see lift in those geos, right? Like that's one way to approach it when you're spending a lot of money. And then just some of the other typical, 50 grand in a multi-million-dollar MMM is probably not going to show up very, very impactful. But from an MTA perspective, you could measure it very directly. So combining maybe some I'm going to call them concentrated geo spend on that 50 grand, and then also an MTA is probably the approach that I would typically take with that.
What I might add to that is that one of the challenges that we've seen with small tests like that is just sample size and the amount of volatility that can come with a sample size, the amount of influence that if you get one big order in, it can really throw your AOV to give a lot of false signals. So we pay really close attention to confidence intervals, really close attention to p-value on our tests, and it's super important in my experience to make sure that whatever your confidence measurements are, that you wait until they sort of sit still before you really take action on them. Because if you launch a test on Monday and then you read it on Friday, there's a chance that the statistics say that you've reached confidence, but if that it's subject to, if you haven't even covered a weekend yet, for example, based on timing, you could easily come in on Monday and have I've seen tests reverse results. So there's a lot of reasons why you might want to do a small test. Most often it's some form of risk management, and I think that what you could do is maybe start with a small test just to make sure that nothing seems crazy out of line, and then depending on the setup of your tests, some tests you can throttle up your exposure. So maybe you start out at 50,000, and if everything looks like it's still worth testing, then you start ramping into a bigger portion of your overall spend.
Yeah, Ryan, one thing I would say that I always caution brands about with testing as well. So let's say you do turn on a 50 grand a week test, and I always ask you this question. I'll say, how much after the first week, when you measure the benefit of that test, what cost are you going to measure it against? Because in advertising, you're buying a future order, right? Like in marketing, you're buying a future order. You will realize the benefit from that 50 grand over a long period of time. And so where I see a lot of brands falter is like they come in, to your point, and they try to measure it within a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And let's say you come in 2 weeks later and you're measuring against 100 grand in spend, you better have some type of time decay curve or cost allocation curve so you don't measure it against 100,000. Because what's happening is you're only realizing a fraction of the benefit that it may actually bring you. And so when you go to measure it in your organization, that you might have spent 100 grand, but you can only measure against $20,000 or $30,000 in cost at that point to get a real read on the kind of return on ad spend that you would actually get. And I see a lot of brands falter. They'll say, oh, well, the campaign's not working for me. Look how low the ROAS is. Well, you just haven't even realized the benefit yet.
Yeah, I completely agree with that outlook. And in fact, Ryan, I've heard you talk before about, how do you select the metric that you want to use to measure? It's common and usually very sound to be looking at revenue per visit, margin per visit better if you can get there. But then, we have campaigns that we run that from a margin per visit basis may underperform some of the other campaigns that are available to us. But if you've the privilege to be working with a pretty strong analytics group, factoring in your customer acquisition rates as well as your lifetime value can really flip the economics on some pretty important channels.
Yep.
I'll just make one comment there, Jenny, as a vendor, right? If a client is spending $1 million a month with us, first of all, my strong hope and belief, and almost assuredly true, would be we would have been running incrementality tests kind of along the way there. So we'd hope that we never get to a position where someone's spending $1 million a month and has never tested incrementality. If you were, though, you never know how things work. We'd actually encourage you to be like, look, either we're incremental or we're not. Like, we need to, and yeah, it's probably a little risky as a vendor to say this, but you should be confident in that entire $1 million, not just 50,000. Like, I would try to find the smallest amount I can withhold to do a high quality study. And that might be a 90-10 split, for example, on that big a spend. It might even be 95-5. So all you've got to do is go dark in 50, 75,000 and do a real high quality, one variable control, exposure and non-exposure, and get some results that you're comfortable with. And then you're essentially testing the whole $1 million.
We have a ton of questions coming in from the audience, so I want to get another one in, which is from Steven, who's the VP of Digital from Aloha, and he asks, what are your thoughts on one of the new age MMM platforms that ingest data in real time from various sources, say like Amazon, Shopify, Meta, Google, Snap, etc., and offer AI-fueled recommendations on how to drive incremental performance between campaigns and ad mediums or platforms?
Yep.
Maybe I will probably have a different thought than maybe the rest of the crew, which is I think that could be fine depending on, what line of business or what category you're talking about. What I have found with our MMM solutions, because we actually, since I've worked at Walmart, tried to stand them up a couple different times, is that there are just so many inherent parts of our business, economic factors as it relates to our particular business that are so critical to understand that impact the outcomes, that I think outsourcing, if I can use that word, some of that to like tools, technology, like you just described, Jenny, are a little bit like tough for me to wrap my head around. Although maybe as the landscape changes and evolution happens, there could be, more of a space for something like that.
Yeah, I'll say too, from this perspective, once again, from the data capture layer, like you think about what a modern MarTech stack looks like, you have to make sure that you're feeding an MMM. Like if it's an AI driven MMM, for example, you have to make sure that you're feeding it all of the right data sources, and that starts to become a challenge for brands that are spending their advertising dollars in a lot of different places. Okay. So there are API connectors and feeds that you can get for all of your ad platform data. Meta, Google, RTV, all the different programmatic advertisers. But what happens when you get into something like I'm going to call it programmatic direct mail, or catalog sends, or billboard buys, or linear TV buys, or terrestrial radio buys, right? And are you feeding your MMM that data in a really I'm going to call it kind of an automated and sophisticated framework, right? And what does your MarTech stack look like? Like, how do you get from where you are today to where you should be? And it starts with building out that data layer, right? With all your ad platform data, all of your marketing touch point and event tracking data, first party data, third party data. And then the third thing where I see a lot of MMMs start to fail, especially if you're trying to use like an AI driven solution, is, are you feeding it your actual sales and transaction data, or is it reliant upon some like pixel based transaction, right? And typically pixel based conversion it's not the best in terms of it creates it has flaws with it, right? It doesn't capture cancels and returns and that type of thing. So are you using the true source of truth for the revenue or the metric that you're trying to really optimize on? Like if you're trying to optimize on LTV, for example, which is one of the things I would suggest, right? Like, are you feeding it the right LTV components from your source of truth, right? And how good is your MarTech stack at doing that to feed an MMM? You know, because the actual MMM modeling is not the overly difficult part for an organization. The collecting of data to feed an MMM properly is the harder part. It can be a very manual process and it can be a very expensive process, but refining that data capture and data layer will just enable you to do so much more in advanced measurement in the future.
Just a couple more minutes.
Jenny, just marketers love companies that say, hey, we do this for you in real time. But the fundamental nature of incrementality isn't a real-time business. Yeah. It's a careful study over a long period of time that you then maybe can apply in real time down the line. But I like to just draw that distinction between a study period that's going to need to take place and then you apply it in sort of real time going forward.
That's right.
With just a couple more minutes left, I want to do a rapid fire question for all of you. What is one piece of advice that you'd give the marketers who are trying to master incrementality in 2025? What should they focus on first? And then if we were to revisit this conversation in a year, what's the biggest shift you expect that will happen in 1 year? Taryn, I'll start with you.
Advice-wise, I would just get everybody, all the stakeholders on the same page, like really at the onset, like, are you interested in true incrementality? And do you all have the same definition of what that actually is? I think you'll find lots of assumptions made and you were ships passing in the night. You didn't actually have the same true definition of what incrementality meant for your business. And people claim to be aligned, but probably weren't when you start to peek under the hood. And I'm being a little cynical and I hope I'm wrong, but we probably will have the same conversation a year from now. I hope that's not true, but I think we're in like a little bit of a glacial pace conversation. And I think that's okay. But I haven't seen things just like changing extremely rapidly, you know, over the course of a year duration.
Yeah, I would say two pieces of advice. One, make sure that your data capture and data house is in order, like in that you are refining that process. And the second thing is don't be afraid to challenge like the traditional ways in which you measure things. Like if you find ways to move beyond LTA and it's valid, like take those steps, because the customer journey is so such a spider web and it takes so many touches that don't be afraid to challenge the typical ways in which you measure things. Like if you have an LTV model, don't be afraid to use it and move beyond the immediate impact, right? And optimize on those things.
The tip I would provide is sort of the most important thing is to design how you're going to decide first, right? So whatever decision you're going to make, what exactly do you need to know in order to act on that decision with confidence, and make sure that all of the things that you start executing against then to try to drive that decision making are going to get you the data that you're going to need in order to make that decision with confidence. And then what's the future going to be like? I think that the big shift in customer behavior that is going to ultimately lead to a shift in how we have to market and interact with our consumers overall is just the continued growth of AI, both as a tool set for us as retailers, as well as just the impact that it's going to have on consumer behavior. If we get to a future where Google may continue to be the dominant search engine, but people aren't using search engines, web search as much as they're using, direct response answers from the chat GPTs or the Claudes. How does that shift our SEO strategy? How does that shift our PPC strategies? I think that everyone is still trying to figure that out.
And my advice, do what your vendors do to you. Send them an unsolicited email. Dear vendor, my CMO, CFO, CEO, you pick, has declared that all metrics need to not just be attributed, but incremental. Please write me back in 250 words or less what you offer and how you study incrementality for your platform. Sincerely, your customer.
And Jason, it'll have to be titled.
Send that out to everyone you spend more than $1,000 a month with and see what you get.
But it'll have to be titled "Hi Gillespie." Get that a lot.
And, hi Gillespie, sure.
Yeah, and also probably mention your direct competitor as the company they think you work at.
Good move. Yeah. And by the way, we're asking this to your direct competitor also, right?
That's a good tip.
This conversation has been amazing. Thank you guys so much. I'm going to leave the audience with our Commerce Next steps. This is about kind of summarizing what we talked about. One, get your data capture process in order, understand the feasibility and limitations of your tools, establish that clear vendor accountability, let confidence scores settle before acting, resist that urge to act too quickly because things are volatile, and then align internally around incrementality as a mindset. Taryn, Ryan, Jason, thank you so much for joining us today. Could not have done it without you. Really appreciate your time, and thank you to the audience for all the wonderful questions. And as an audience, please tell us how we did. Leave us some feedback. Thank you guys so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.